Well, hey everyone, my name is Nathan Jones, and if you're new here, welcome. I like to talk about all things movies, specifically Blu-rays, and today we are doing another film journey. It's actually been a bit since we've done this, but I have a few lined up with some good friends, and the first and foremost is my friend Davy, who has a great YouTube channel. You've changed it before, but now I think it's Davy's Cinema Flicks and Music Picks, right?
Rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it?
It does.
Cinema flicks and music picks. The amount of 10-second videos of me getting that wrong and then having to start again. Yeah, that will be a compilation video one day.
I can't wait for it. Yeah, I hope I can put a link in the description.
Yeah,
one day when people check it out. But Davey, how are you doing?
Can't complain. I can if you want, but that will be a separate video. We might be here for a while.
Let's write that down. So for later, complaining video. All right.
Yeah.
So I know you've been recently on YouTube, not too long, right?
Yes. So November. So relatively recently. And it was just watching videos and things during the pandemic and lockdown, and much more free time in my hands. And I've always watched YouTube, but I think it's a great outlet for people to express their own creativity without many resources. And channels like, say, Red Letter Media and things, who have entertained me for years. I've watched them before I've watched a lot of Hollywood films and things like that. I look forward to their reviews more than the films most of the time. And then I saw reviewers like yourself, where I'd say, yeah, I think I could give that a bash, a more in-depth approach to things without flashy production or the need to edit every 2 seconds, because no harm against anyone who does it, but I'm not a big fan of that style where you can tell if someone's made a mistake, they just cut to them saying it again every 5 seconds and every sentence has to be correct. I much prefer the more informal, here's what I think, and let's just go for it approach. So channels like yourself, like Aaron Pinn's live chats, Brian on the Just the Discs and things, and his podcast with Elric and things. Those kind of things just gave me a bit of inspiration where I thought, maybe there's a bit of a niche where I could talk about things and some people might listen. And if they don't, at least I've said it.
Right.
And then a few people did. And I'm still down at 100 and something subs. But it's, for only a few months, and I'm happy with that because I haven't done any kind of cheaper videos in terms of just, here's my reaction to the new Spider-Man trailer, here's my Boba Fett weekly reaction that I upload 1 second after the episode finishes. And
well, speaking of, we have that clip, very clip. Let's put it right here.
And I like those things. I watched Marvel movies and I watched Boba Fett, but I don't have a passion to sit down like this and talk about them. It would come across very much as clickbait.
Right.
So I'd rather talk about things. Yeah, they won't get a big engagement with a wide base, perhaps, but those that do watch it may be more engaged than percentage wise than the people who would passively watch if it was just, I wonder if he's going to slag this film, or if, that kind of thing.
Right.
Because my biggest video was the new Ghostbusters box set, the big 4K set, and that got 3,000 views or so. And really, all it meant was more people were there just to see what it looked like because mine came early. That's all it was. It wasn't that they were particularly interested in what I had to say about Ghostbusters. Whereas other videos where I've had 50 views, I've had a lot more people talk to me about the movies, and, engage with me, and have a more natural dialogue through that. So that's what I try and cultivate, is my own likes. And if people want to join in the film journey, then they're more than welcome to. And if they want to hop on board and stay on board, that's great. But if they just want to watch what they like or they fancy watching, and then, no, I don't fancy this one. And that's great too, because as you mentioned from the rather uncumbersome name, the channel also covers music. So if someone looks at it and says, well, I don't like Neil Young, I don't expect them to watch that Neil Young video. So, I'll see you next week kind of thing. So,
yeah.
So it's just I can't say there's something for everyone, but it's all about just building a bit of a back catalogue, and then it helps me appreciate what I have more than just sticking things away on shelves as well. So.
Yeah, it seems like you have obviously, like you said, since November, really have started to gain some comfortability with what you're doing, and you're just that's obviously what you're showcasing, right? Is the stuff that you want to talk about, and you're doing it kind of in a similar vein to, I feel like, the people you've mentioned as well. We're just talking about the things we're passionate about, and you can see that through our videos, hopefully. And that's the reason why, obviously, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, actually, because I could tell that you had that passion for the things you wanted to mention. So. Yeah, so I do suggest people check out Davy's channel. I'm going to say it the first time here now. It's down in the description. But I want to kind of segue from here to the thing that everyone probably clicked on this video for, which is the film journey, right? So if anyone is new, this film journey is going to kind of just be a really kind of open-ended kind of questions towards Davy, my guest, and we're just going to talk about the things that why he enjoys films, and we might even dive into music too. So, Davy, do you have any early memories with film itself?
Yes, indeed. So my earliest memory, which I'm constantly reminded of by my mother, is being taken to a cinema chain that we used to have in the UK called the ABC, and they would run kids clubs, and they would show say an A film, a B film, cartoons, and they would invariably be third run movies, fourth run, so you'd be getting last year's hit film. And then a film from 20 years ago, and then some Looney Tunes that they'd found in the back somewhere. But my earliest memory of film is being very upset. My mother was called by the cinema and had to come and collect me by a film called All Dogs Go to Heaven.
Oh, yeah.
Which, if people haven't heard of it, the title is very apt. It's literally about a bunch of dead dogs. And they do go to heaven, so I suppose that's nice. But it's Nightmare Fuel, which I think that's part of maybe what's slightly lost is children's films used to be genuinely quite terrifying. Return to Oz and things like that, and Labyrinth,
Fantasia.
and whatnot. Yeah, I wasn't quite around when that came out, but
you'll get there.
Yeah, although I do remember going to watching. I think we got shown in primary school, and it was all terribly exciting. Because Wagner and things, kids love that. And it's exciting. But the first film that I do remember seeing in the cinema clearly with my own eyes, so not because of a traumatic memory about dogs dying, is the 1990 classic Dick Tracy with Warren Beatty.
Yeah.
So this was the first film that I really remember sitting through and just wow. And to this day, I think that film just holds up remarkably well in terms of being, it's post Batman, so it's got that kind of set design that's very much like Tim Burton's Batman, which is another very early memory for me, so that's why I pulled that one. But the colours popped, the characters were all memorable, and it just felt cinematic. It just felt like that was something that you didn't get on British television. It felt like another world, a Technicolor world. It was like Dorothy opening the door in the Wizard of Oz and stepping out, and seeing all the Munchkins
Dick
and
Tracy and Batman.
yeah. Well, there's a crossover whenever knew we needed, and then a couple of years later to kind of complete the Pulp trilogy, and just because I've always loved this cover as well, another great early film that I saw was The Rocketeer.
Oh yeah, great movie
with that really great Art Deco poster, and Timothy Dalton as our villain in it, who's just absolutely fantastic.
Great villain. He's a great villain in the things he's been in.
He's my favorite Bond personally. So I've always loved Timothy Dalton. Up to this day, he's in Doom Patrol on the DC show.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that yet. So
yeah, he's in that with Brendan Fraser and Michelle Gomez and stuff. So yeah, I do the comic book stuff as well. So although I said I don't have a passion for it, I do watch that stuff. So yeah, Timothy Dalton. But yeah, so that's kind of my earliest memories of film. Yeah.
So I suppose starting from those late 80s and early 90s kind of darker worlds, and also Art Deco worlds, and that detective, almost like a callback to like the 20s and 30s a little bit, obviously in the modern context of when those came out, right? And that flavor is very strong. And I remember those movies as well growing up. Obviously, a little bit later for me when it comes to like I watched the earlier like the George Clooney and Val Kilmer Batmans.
Terribly sorry.
I know it's unfortunate, but I do remember obviously watching the Keaton Batmans, and going back to those and just adoring those and remembering that time period. But when you started getting a little bit older, do you remember kind of that next step of when you got kind of past those parts, and like what would maybe be the next logical step for you in terms of what you enjoyed?
Yeah, so as a kid, as I mentioned, it was my mother who would take me to the cinema for those trips, but my dad would never let us watch kids' movies because we had one video machine, or VCR, I guess you call them over there, and he wouldn't sit through that kind of nonsense. So I didn't see 99% of kids' movies until I was an adult. I literally saw E.T. for the first time when I was about 32. I've no joke, and Disney almost a complete blank spot for me until I was an adult. So I grew up with John Wayne, Humphrey Bogart, Jimmy Cagney. There you go. Is that To Have and Have Not?
It's just a picture of them, Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart together.
Good old Lauren Bacall. Did you watch The Sopranos?
Yeah, I have it on the shelf, and I know a lot about it, but go on, I haven't seen the whole thing. I know
she plays herself in an episode, and it's one of the funniest things you'll ever see in your life.
Okay, excellent.
I won't spoil it because it's too good.
All right.
But yes, it was all those older films, and then over here we also had silent films were still being shown on television, because we only had when I was a kid 4 channels. Until I was about 8 when we got cable, and that took us up to about 40 odds or so. We've never had as many as America. But because of that, and the channels just to shut down, overnight and things, so, it was all very compressed. So, but they would spend their money on reasonably high quality British TV. So that's why people can have this impression of British TV being, of a certain standards, because it tended to be that during the day you would get repeats and things of classic movies, and then at night time you would get what would end up being shown on PBS and things, and over there. To this day, it's still things like Downton and all that kind of nonsense, which. But I preferred it when it was called Upstairs, Downstairs. So growing up, I never really had a differentiation between black and white and colour films, old films and new films. They were, to quote Billy Joel, it's all rock and roll to me, and that's one of the few times I'll ever quote Billy Joel. I quite like him actually, but it's not that cool a name to drop. Yeah. I'd say maybe around 12. was when I discovered, and I have been preparing, so I did bring out props. And it was a video that I'll put these over here. So we
I've got props too. Don't worry. See. There's my Groucho Marx glasses right up there.
So. I remember your dad dropping them off in your Christmas box. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
See,
I grew up that way.
I remember the real bizarre miscellany of people's lives. So I won't remember people's names, but I remember how they got the Groucho Marx glasses. And then when I was about 12, a show which had been on in the early 90s came back to British TV called Moviedrome, presented by Mark Cousins. And Mark would curate, so he wasn't just a presenter, but he'd curate films, cult films, horror films, little scene films, classic films, LGBTQ plus films, maybe an oddball western, things like that hadn't been shown in years or had never been shown in some cases. So this is Mark Cousins' story of film, An Odyssey, which I recently did. I did a big video on Mark Cousins about his whole catalogue, about his feature films and things, and Mark very kindly got in touch with me about that. So that show itself meant that Friday and Saturday nights were film night for me. So we'd already be able to rent things from the video shop, or the rental store. I'm trying to think of the Americanisms every time I say something.
Video, we call it video store too.
Store. All right, I'll remember store. So shop, store. Okay. Sidewalk.
There's all this lingo.
Yeah. Lift, elevator, and for goodness sake, don't ask what fanny means over here. So Mark was showing all these films, which were, unbeknownst to me, cult cinema, but they weren't promoted as cult cinema. They were just interesting films. So some of them were probably far too inappropriate for a 12, 13, 14-year-old as the show went on, but it became a kind of ritual for me to watch those. And that got me into, very young, the films of David Lynch and Cronenberg and Nick Roeg, and, but then not even great auteurs like that, even just Stuart Gordon and, George Romero and, kind of more oddball ones, even Herschel Gordon Lewis and things. Yeah. And again, it was all just cinema. And then on Channel 4, so that was BBC 2, on Channel 4, you'd have very similar. Mark Kermode would introduce shows, which would then go into that night's film, and that would often be, Blade Runner or something like that. Again, it was all just cinema to me. So, I was just absorbing everything that was coming my way. And I live right next to a cinema. There's a cinema just literally 150 yards up the road. So even as a kid, I'd be able to just go to the cinema as and when I wanted, and sneak in the back door when I was a kid. But
my fair share of sneaking into some movies.
Yeah. So the TV would be these classic films, cult films, and etc. But at the box office, the cinema, it might be, what would it be, in the 96-ish? So we're talking maybe The Rock, Con Air, Face Off, and probably some films that didn't have Nicolas Cage in them. But,
a lot of testosterone, sounds like.
Yeah. Which, I don't think I can watch. I can't watch films like that anymore. They just, unless it's a nostalgic thing. Like Con Air, we just quoted like nobody's business because John Malkovich was so much fun. But I can't go back and watch many of those films now. So, but certainly one big passion from that period that I discovered was. And it wasn't through Moviedrome with Mark, but it was the same channel, BBC 2, used to have double feature horror nights. A bit like what was the name of that TNT Monster Vision? Is that what it was called in the States? I think there was a show called Monster Vision. Joe Bob Briggs did it.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I remember it, but I remember he did like some kind of, well, obviously he did it at the drive-in.
Yeah, so
stuff with him, but
it was essentially the same kind of idea, although they didn't have to censor it over here because British censorship's a lot more loose than it is in America, unless it was in the 80s itself where it was quite strict, and we had the video nasties, etc., which some of them have been released now and they're only 12s. It's quite ridiculous how they were outright banned.
12. Wow, that's a lot. I need to ask my mom and dad if I can watch that. So.
And again, in this house, we never had any rules about that. You were actively encouraged to watch Nightmare on Elm Street, or things like that.
If you do something wrong, here's what's going to happen.
Well, it was more just, no, you're not watching the Care Bears. Here's Child's Play. Go watch that. It seems to be suitable for kids.
Dolls in it,
right? But yeah, so Hammer is an example that picked as, and the reason I didn't pick any of those sets to bring down as a prop is because I knew you have them sitting right there. So I thought, preaching to the choir. So this is from Australia, the Hammer collection of Blu-rays, and this has some films that I do remember seeing on BBC Two at the time, including one of my all-time favourite Hammers, Quatermass in the Pit. Which I had third one, with Andrew Keir playing Quatermass, which you don't need to see them in order because the first two are Brandon Levy, who's pretty awful, but it also has my real favourite Hammer, which is The Devil Rides Out.
That's a fun one, yeah.
That is just fun. Christopher Lee is the good guy. When people ask me to recommend them horror, I do tend to recommend Devil Rides Out quite early on and say Christopher Lee not only plays a good guy, but gets to take on the devil and the angel of death.
And a giant spider, right?
Yeah, and the giant spider. After the angel of death and the devil. Pretty badass to say the least. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I, by the age of about 14, 15, was really into kind of classic cinema.
Nice. So obviously, when you were saying your father is like, none of that nonsense. We're just going to focus on this. Were they also interested in film?
Yeah, my dad was. I distinctly remember him waking me up one night to watch Caddyshack, like 1 a.m. He said, like, you need to put skill in the morning. He was like, yeah, we're watching Caddyshack, come on. And to this day, that's my strongest memory of Caddyshack. My mum's a bit like most mums, where anything older than about 2 years ago is an old movie, and she's not fussed, I think
that's the generation I teach now. Like, that came out in 2016. That's old.
Yeah,
I'm like, what are you talking about?
She was asking for recommendations not long ago, and I said, well, I was, on Netflix. I said, there's In a Line of Fire, and she said, oh, I'm not watching an old movie. I said, it was 1993. Look at Clint there,
It's almost 30 years,
Yeah. But yeah, she's got no time for anything black and white. No chance. Which is funny because she grew up with black and white. Maybe that's what put her off. But yeah. So.
Well, nice. Do you kind of jumping forward, I guess, from that point in those teenage years? When did it kind of become something? I guess maybe in the teenage years, was that when you're like, okay, I know I really, really like this medium, and I really want to kind of pursue this, at least in my hobbies or interests or anything like that later on?
Yeah, I guess it kind of just happened organically. It became apparent to me that I was a lot more into movies than my friends were. They were interested in whatever that week's big movie was, and not watching Moviedrome or not watching the Hammer repeats or the Universal horror repeats and things. They were only really interested in the actiony stuff or whatever the big movie was. So we came joined in some places where Tarantino was a big one for us in the mid-90s, obviously. We just thought that was the coolest kind of movie you could get was Pulp Fiction. And then we were young enough and silly enough to love all the Pulp Fiction kind of knockoffs that happened, where every character's ridiculously cool, everybody wears sunglasses, and not one character talks in anything but ridiculously wonderful platitudes and monologues.
Yeah.
Those, like Things to Do in Denver when they're dead, that kind of movie. Tarantino was in one. What was that called? Destiny Turns on the Radio. He plays Johnny Destiny in that.
Johnny Destiny.
Yeah, which pretty terrible movie. So yeah, that was kind of where we intersected, because good few friends of mine were into those kind of films. But even that led to some good ones, because that movement also gave us True Romance, which I know was earlier than Pulp Fiction, but it didn't come out until later on video over here. It was banned for a little while with the remnants of the BBFC. Well, Reservoir Dogs didn't come out here until after Pulp Fiction because of the ban on home video. Just like The Exorcist, that was 98 that came out in video here. It never came out before that.
That's a funny one, because they played the hell out of that on TV, which, like, my parents got scarred watching it on TV.
Yeah.
In the States, but thinking, obviously of the censors overseas, it's like, okay, wow. This did not become a thing.
And the odd thing is, it was endorsed at the time by the Catholic Church because it's pro-religion.
Right. It's got a positive message with them. Really.
The priests in it literally are correct, and they know how to fight Satan. So it's not, without spoiling The Exorcist. Actually, we can spoil The Exorcist. What am I talking about?
Yeah, we can.
Father Caddis makes a sacrifice and goes down the stairs so that Reagan can live. So good triumphs over evil. But we're talking about it used to be called the British Board of Film Censors. It's now the British Board of Film Classification. They're much more liberal now, thank goodness. And most of the video nasties either have been cleared or just haven't been resubmitted to be cleared, because you have to pay a couple of grand to resubmit a movie to have it considered by the censors / classifiers. Right. A lot of those video nasties would now be passed either uncut or, in a lot of cases, as I said, 12s and 15s, which is just bizarre. Yeah. Famously, they banned The Wrong Funhouse. They meant to ban an Italian movie called The Funhouse, and they banned Toby Hooper's Funhouse by accident. Which, that suits for you. So.
Well, that is a whole another conversation that I find very fascinating, just from a cultural standpoint, obviously. I mean, and it wouldn't just be, our cultures. It could be, think of like the French culture, where, that's the complete opposite, where like that sexuality are way open. Or even you'd think something like the Japanese culture, a lot of their films might be a little bit more, I guess, orderly. I mean, like, obviously, like
stoic.
There's a different, it feels Japanese, which is that's the thing too, and that's the reason I like, obviously, there's these different cultures have different kind of, I guess, perspectives just based on how they're putting things out. But at the same time, it is very interesting to kind of see that control over the medium itself, and like what would happen and what could come through or not. So as a whole thing.
And you get to the point where things are now cleared that would just never have had a chance. I mean, now you mentioned France as an example. Arrow were releasing 2 more Gaspar Noé films next month. And we've already had Irreversible here. And Love was released uncut here. Films like that would have been banned completely 20, 30 years ago over here. They would never have seen the light of day under the Thatcher government. But now they get released with boutique labels and, plethora of extras and treated like they are as art house cinema. Take another example, Lars von Trier, making some extreme cinema. But never for the sake of extremity, which, I think that's what the censors have always missed, is that just because something extreme happens doesn't mean that it's bad.
And this actually is a good segue into music and making me think of Tipper Gore over here in the States, and thinking about,
there you go.
The parental advisory warning on records and CDs. So,
and it had the opposite effect, because that became a badge of honor for albums, and kids would say, "Oh, look at this! It's got a sticker on it, or it must be good." So if it was a rap album and it didn't have that, it would get put back. So we would see the BBFC logos, and if we saw the deep red, it meant 18. That must be definitely it's coming home. So it had the complete opposite effect of what they wanted it to. I know Frank Zappa testified against Tipper Gore, and so did Dee Snider from Twisted Sister and things. You cannot. I believe personally that if something is not an illegal act, and I don't mean depicting an illegal act, but if something itself is not an illegal act, then it should be able to be shown to any consenting adult on film.
Yeah.
Have the appropriate warnings up front. I'm all for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, me too.
We do have that on BBFC warnings. If I show you, and here's one here. I won't spoil what the film is, because I'm going to rub it in your nose in a minute. But it says it's 18, contains strong sex, bloody violence, and horror. So I'm all for that. Where you can, so that's maybe not my kind of 18. So I'll move on.
Right.
If you happen to be, someone who doesn't let the go. Some of these descriptions are wonderful, though. Mild peril was always my favourite.
Mild peril.
The PG, you'll find quite a lot of mild peril. Pirates of the Caribbean contains mild peril. You think,
what could it be? Do they have to go across some kind of bridge, and one of the ropes snaps? And
it's mild peril. So maybe the rope will just start to until
wobbles a little wobble, and something's about to happen. Luckily,
they'll just put the one foot will go through a little bit of woods, and then,
one of the wood things. That's just one though. Otherwise, it's going to have to be peril, and we're going
and if it was outright peril, then curse of the black peril, if you will.
Ooh, and check. Everyone subscribe. That's great. As a teacher, I like that. So I guess kind of a little bit of a segue here. Thinking about this more as your adult self now. We can question if we're adults or not, but what would you say has your taste kind of morphed into? Is there anything that you're currently going through that you are enjoying, that maybe those past films that you've mentioned kind of lay the groundwork for?
No, not particularly as in one movement or whatnot, but certainly when I saw things like The Story of Film and a great documentary called Hollywood, and it was from the 80s. It was narrated by James Mason, and that featured a lot of silent films that haven't been remembered. They've kind of been forgotten, and things that concentrated a lot more. Because if you make that documentary now, it would be Keaton, it would be Lloyd, it would be Chaplin, and things. Right. But this concentrated a lot more on like the French silent films, and Victor Sjöström up in Sweden, and Eric von Stroheim, and the Weimar films from Germany and that kind of stuff. So I'm always open to discovering new film movements, and certainly The Story of Film led me to discover more African film and things like that, where that had been not a closed door, but I feel like there just wasn't access to it. There didn't seem like there was any real outlet. Whereas there was a label over here called Tartan.
Yeah, I've heard of that label. I have an Old Boy. I think
they had Old Boy back in the day. They went bust, but back in the day they were the home of Asian cinema. So Asia was reasonably well covered, but that wasn't just kung fu flicks and whatnot, that tended to be more extreme Asian cinema. One of my favorites was Save the Green Planet from South Korea. As you said, Old Boy. So, films that back then were just considered very obscure, which nowadays a boutique would put them out and we wouldn't think twice about it. We have a much more open world. So those African films, for example, we still don't have a great avenue, but we do have things like the World Film Project, which Eureka release and Masters Cinema release. There you go. Where we get a bit of an insight into Turkish film or into Moroccan film and things like that. And then we had what was his name? The Turkish director who had a really big hit. Well, Once Upon a Time in Anatolia.
I know the movie, but I can't think of.
Oh, yes, his name's just going to. It's there's a box set of his out.
Let us know down
in the UK. And over here we have quite a few labels that put out box sets of a lot of film directors from around the world. So there is a Lars von Trier box set. There's Truffaut box sets. There's I know obviously Criterion have covered a lot of this as well, but Artificial Eye and things like that, and much more affordably than Criterion's because they don't tend to have as many extras, which some people would see as a downfall. But to me, making the films affordable,
I think it's very much a positive. I mean,
and then if there's better editions, you can always investigate further down the line.
I was going to say, I remember talking off camera before, we were mentioning, that like whole concept of just, it doesn't matter what boutique label puts out, whatever, it's as long as it's exposed to, in some degree to a lot of people. And affordability is a huge thing. That's like a whole nother conversation, right? Obviously this is a very privileged niche boutique thing that we do. And most of the world streams now. So this could, it could be a whole different thing, but at the end of the day, I'm going to let you finish your thought here.
No, I mean, I think that's exactly right. That we are a niche of a niche, really, especially because those that do still buy physical media, it tends to be still DVDs, the dominant format, because so many still pick up the big blockbusters on DVD. They just don't put videos up about them. They pick them up in Walmart. There you go. There's your American version. Tesco or something over here, but Walmart or Amazon or whatever. And there's no reason to post about it. They're maybe not that passionate about it, but they still outrank people that buy boutiques, massively. But we're doing our part. We're supporting the labels, and the labels seem to be having a lot of success these days with Indicator having a lot of sellouts. Their sales always seem very successful. We're due a flash sale next week. Criterion's one's on at the moment. Kino have got sales off and on. So there's always if only Imprint would have a sale one of these days.
Shipping sale, where as in we don't charge for shipping.
Oh, can you imagine? I would have to buy everything. I love their stuff. It's just the shipping kills it. It really does. One title, I can't do it. A £30 purchase becomes nearly £60.
Now, I will say I did just get this one, but I mean, I got it from
the box sets. I don't include in that.
But like for an individual, exactly, you're exactly right. I mean, those individual titles, and that's another whole conversation. I know we're going off track, but it's fun to do it like this. But that whole conversation of like, obviously, people who are watching this. Everyone, I know several people from different countries, everyone, who's like watching this, and, luckily we're able to talk to each other and do these things. And luckily there's companies, at least in, mostly the ones that I know, of course, are, Australia, the UK and in America. Like that's where a lot of the boutique labels are. Obviously there's other ones too, and I might not even know terribly too much about all of them. But, I find it really interesting that we are able to, just get exposed to this stuff, and at the same time, talk about, I don't know where I was going with this one. I had a whole thought. Now I just completely went blank. I love it.
Yeah, but yeah, the different labels. I always tell people as well, check Amazon France and Amazon Germany, because I have got loads and loads of Jimmy Stewart movies, Bogart movies, Burt Lancaster movies that either haven't been released anywhere else or haven't been released for years anywhere else, from Amazon Germany or Amazon France.
Yeah, I actually have German films over there because I got it from Amazon Germany. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So, they're great outlets. The German market has a lot of Westerns that have never been released outside of Germany.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've got Barbara Stanwyck movies, and one of my real favourite actors is Stacey Keach. I've got quite a few of his from France. So, it's whatever niche might have popped in. So maybe the Westerns didn't sell too well in some countries, so you don't get them. I mean, I know over here there's a quite a famous 5-pack which has got like Pale Rider and How the West Was Won. It's got Unforgiven, the Wild Bunch, and I can't remember the last one. I was doing so well.
One more.
But that 5-pack was only done because those 5 movies didn't sell terribly well individually. So big hitters like those, the Wild Bunch, How the West Was Won, the Searchers.
Yeah.
And if they ain't selling well, then what chance have you got for so-called small movies? So that's why we had a real dearth of Westerns in this country for a long time, until companies like Arrow and Masters of Cinema, with there's Johnny Guitar behind you, for example, The Grand Silence, The Great Silence, I should say. They pick up the slack, but they have to sell it as a boutique, because releasing it to the mainstream just through Amazon doesn't work.
Yeah, it's the same, and it's the same too. Like, I can think of, we mentioned earlier, like your father, and also my dad, like huge Western fan. Like all dads are. We all know this. So the fun thing about that is, like, my dad, he's so like invested into cable. And like he wants nothing to do with this. Like, he obviously has DVDs and VHSs, like when were growing up, and eventually changing that. But at the same time, he is so set to his cable, and he watches, I guess here in the States, like AMC and a lot of TCM. So a lot of those very specific things, like a lot of those people who are watching that, the reason they're watching that is because they don't need to buy it. And they don't, Westerns are a really great example, whereas, like, especially here in the States, like, a lot of Westerns are made here, right? But at the same time, not most people are probably not going to own like a physical copy of a Western, right? And so it's very interesting to kind of see where the boutique labels kind of pick up.
Yeah.
So
you're right, where there is this, it's also partially because the studios won't license the really big titles, what they see as kind of the marquee stuff, to the boutique labels, with exceptions. For a long time,
Halloween.
Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane was off limits. They wouldn't license that out. Warner Brothers, they eventually did, obviously, to Criterion, because it was useful to them to have Criterion do the 4K. Well, we know how that went with the. Did you see that wonderful video on Reddit of they asked people to just post a picture of their destroyed? Oh, that was
I know what you're talking about. If anyone's curious what we're talking about, go look up the Criterion Citizen Kane replacement disc, and then just type in like Snowball or Rosebud. Just type in those, and you'll get something good.
Yeah, we wouldn't spoil it because it's too good. I think it's that was genius. That was absolute genius. They should have sent him some extra vouchers or something, because that was genius. But yeah, so I think with films, like, just take those ones as an example, say The Wild Bunch or The Searchers, they're not going to give those to Eureka or Arrow. So they take the Johnny Guitars or the Great Silences, or the Alfredo Garcias and whatnot. They're just bubbling under. Not quite top tier in terms of the way the studios see them, but certainly top tier the way we see them. Because,
Absolutely.
To me, Alfredo Garcia is one of the best films of the 70s, and Johnny Guitar is one of the best films of the 50s. With one of the great villains of all time, Mercedes McCambridge, as Emma in Johnny Guitar. She's fantastic, and she was the voice of Pazuzu in The Exorcist. to bring it back around, it's just bizarre, yeah.
Such a man. The females in that film, like Jesus.
Yeah. It's such a misnomer that it's called Johnny Guitars.
Yeah, it's barely about
because Johnny's at best the third biggest character in that film.
So I guess moving from, those different types of things that would eventually evolve into what you are watching now. Do you have some favorite films that you have that you would like to share with us? Here we go.
So I did say there was one that I was going to have to rub your nose in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm terribly sorry.
Oh, I know where it is. I know where we're going here.
I know, because I did say I could send you one over, and you said it's okay. Now I know that it exists. So here's the Odeon release of Blood on Satan's Claw, from my money, the greatest folk horror ever made, which is plenty of extras on that down the bottom.
Yeah.
But then Odeon evolved into Screambound, and Screambound then put out a deluxe edition of it.
That's the one I've seen on Amazon, at least the UK.
Yeah, this is the limited slipcase one with numbered. So this is number 36. Oh, look at that! I've won the lottery. The only thing about this, and it will get some OCD types, is this version comes up with the title card saying Blood on Satan's Claw. This comes up with the title card saying Satan's Skin, which is the director's preferred name for the film. And then, of course, Severin released it.
Which is the one I would have been eyeing, but obviously is way out of print, so...
Yeah. It comes up on their Black Friday and halfway to Black Friday sales. But now that you know that this one's available, to be honest,
the one that I'll probably pick up. Yeah,
there's very little reason to go for this over that if it's an issue.
Right.
I mean, this one also comes. The limited version comes with some postcards and a poster, but nothing. Nothing to cry about. You didn't get the original version. This one did have the soundtrack, so that's the reason to want this one. But again, the main thing's the movie, and so that's why I've got 3 versions of it. But it's there's reasons for it. I mean, these have got different extras slightly, and that one's got the soundtrack, and that one's the only version that's got the original title card. So I've literally owned that one just for the title cards.
Yeah.
Pretty sad, but
hey, look at this. You see this?
Yeah, the LOTRs. Yeah.
I have them in those different formats.
When those came out, those LOTRs, we'd never seen anything like that on home video.
I know.
I mean, it took me about a week to figure out how to work the menus, because it was like that branching thing where you have to go along the trees and.
Yeah. Those DVD menus early on, especially with things that have so much special features, you're just like, what am I even? And then you see what they did last year at the end, try to give us this Ultimate Edition, which is So anyway, enough of that stuff. So.
Yeah, but then they just include. I mean, even in those Blu-ray box sets, it's still just DVD extras, so it's not.
Yeah, and that one at least, it's not that one. But
Blu-ray.
But I understand the multiple copies of something that you really love.
Yeah, I mean, I don't do that as a rule, only for favorites. So for the big hitters. But if you want one of my real favorite films of all time. It would be The Ninth Configuration, directed by William Peter Blatty, who wrote The Exorcist, obviously. But he wrote the novel this was based on. It stars Stacey Keach, Scott Wilson, who would go on to The Walking Dead. I'm not up on The Walking Dead, but I think he played a Herschel or something.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And this, have you seen this?
I have not.
No. This is a terrific film. This is for Second Sight. Put this out over here. An underrated company, if you ask me, who are just doing a big deluxe version of The Witch. Funnily enough, yeah. But this is a bizarre film, but not in an odd way. I can't quite believe what I'm seeing, but I'm really glad that I am. So it starts out almost as a farcical comedy where a doctor is sent to a hospital for soldiers to determine whether or not they're really, mentally ill or if they're faking it, kind of thing. And the place is run like an absolute nut house. And farcical things do happen. There's, an old dogs production of Shakespeare going on in there, and
well, that reminds you of that early
old dogs got and those dogs are all dead now because that film's 40 years old.
And
but the second half completely spins on its head, and I love a film that takes a massive turn, but not in a wait a minute, what's going on here? In an organic kind of sowing the seeds way where things have just started to gradually change, and it becomes a really deep film about the meaning of goodness itself. And the true nature, to quote the Wicker Man, the true nature of human sacrifice. But it's not a Wicker Man style movie. It's a psychological thriller that is just absolutely breathtaking. Again, William Peter Blatty directed it. I think it was the only film he directed other than The Exorcist 3, which I also think is a tremendously underrated film. And it's got a commentary with Blatty and Mark Kermode, one of our great film critics over here. And it's just a fantastic, deep film. In fact, Scott Wilson's character in this is an astronaut who couldn't go through with his mission. And he is apparently supposed to be the same character who's the astronaut in The Exorcist. If you remember, Reagan comes into the party and says, "You're going to die up there."
Okay, so there's like this shared kind of thing that Blatty,
because William Blatty wrote both films, or wrote the novels. So in the novel's got a title which sounds ridiculous when you say it, but in context it works. It's called Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane. Killer Kane's the nickname of one of the characters.
But all my own in high school too. So
yeah,
Killer Kane. Yeah.
So yeah, it's got a bizarre connection to The Exorcist apart from the Blatty thing. So you can kind of watch it as a spin-off from The Exorcist for that character.
The double feature. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, so that is my highest recommendation. If people only take one film away from them, it would be that, because I don't know if there is a particularly good edition of this in the States.
I definitely would recommend people. Well, first and foremost, recommend everyone get a region-free player. You can, but then if anything, I'm sure there's a DVD of that somewhere.
Yeah,
probably rent it at least, like through Amazon or something. But
yeah,
a physical copy, Second Sight for sure.
And the great podcast, what's it called? The booth, the something booth, the screening booth, what's it called? Oh God, it's been going for 1,000,000 years, and they've done 1,000 episodes.
Projection?
The projection booth, of course it is.
Yeah.
Screening booth. They have an episode on that's about 3 hours long, and it goes really deep into it. And I can't recommend enough, after you watch the film and all the special features, listen to that episode of the booth, because that even gives you more subtext, context, ways of reading the film that just that film, when a film hits your sometimes a film hits your brain, sometimes it hits your heart. It's very rarely it can do both at the same time, and that's one of the films that really does that to me. So that would be my numero uno recommendation. But I mentioned Nick Rogue being an early favourite of mine, and I still think he's perhaps the greatest British director who ever was. He did Walkabout, The Man Who Fell to Earth, Eureka, and great movies. But to me, his best maybe Bad Timing with Harvey Keitel and Art Garfunkel, which is it's an incredibly dark film, really intense, and like a lot of Nick Rogue films, it plays with the ideas of duality and personas. It's almost like looking into the abyss, that kind of stuff, where performance literally has a character melding into one kind of thing, whereas his other films explore partnerships and the synergy between people, but sometimes the toxic synergy between people, and that's very much Keitel and Art Garfunkel's relationship in this. And as I'm wearing a Twin Peaks t-shirt, if you have a love of Twin Peaks, then Theresa Russell's character in this is very kind of Laura Palmer-esque in terms of the role she plays in the narrative. So that would be a strong recommendation as well. I don't know if that's, again, got a region A, but this is available
from Network. Yeah, right?
Yeah, Network, and Network sell their Blu-rays so cheap. Brand new, they're £10 or so. So when they're on sale, they're usually about £5, which is just giving them away.
I'm so glad. I know you mentioned earlier the Story of Film. You showed Mark Cousins from Network, but also I have the Up series from them, which I absolutely adore, and I highly recommend to people as well. But yeah, Network's great. I wish there was. Are they region free or is it region B?
They tend to be region locked. Yeah.
Okay. So. But those are UK based.
The Up series. That was from 0 to 63. I think was the last one, wasn't it?
Yeah. And he passed away.
And then McClap had passed away. Yeah. But that complete series, even on release, was about £25.
Yeah, it's very cheap.
Network never ever rip you off for the prices.
Maybe shipping a little bit for here.
Yeah,
but
which the one that always gets me with shipping is I don't know how Eureka managed to ship everything free international. I do not know how they make money out of that.
Well, it takes a little bit longer too, so I would assume that might be the case, but I have no idea on that.
Well, unless they're shipping it in, a message in a bottle and just sticking it in the sea, I don't see how they can not be losing money shipping to Australia and someone in, I don't know, the Antarctic wants a copy of
when you said message in a bottle, I had to say Sting.
And Sting leads us to Englishman in New York, which leads us to Quentin Crisp and the film The Naked Civil Servant, which again is a Network release. So
here we are. It's the Kevin Bacon effect, right? It's that 6 Degree. We're playing that game. So
one film that I think I can comfortably say is considered quite cult. I don't often use the term, as I said. I prefer to just think of films as cinema, but I think he's such a filmmaker that he's just almost the definition of a cult filmmaker, and it's Walter Hill and his film Southern Comfort, which stars one of my favourites of all time, Powers Booth, who's I just adored Powers Booth. I absolutely adored him. Very sad when he passed away. But it's got Keith Carradine as well. Some people would write this off as a bit of a Deliverance type movie, but it's soldiers down in the bayou, National Guardsmen, and Cajun hunters kind of come after them, and there's don't shoot, they're only looking at us, and then somebody does shoot, and it causes a you can kind of read the script from there, but it's just done so well, and there's a wonderful atmosphere to it. And the soundtracks by Ry Cooder, like most of Walter Hill's films, so you get a wonderful swampy soundtrack, great performances, and Walter Hill with stuff like The Warriors, and The Driver with Ryan O'Neill. Is just, The Long Riders, again with Stacey Keach, my boy. I frequently say to people, I think I'm the only person in the world with a Stacey Keach collection. I've literally got a wee collection of that. That is another strong recommendation. But while we're on the subject of cult, here's a blast from the past to show that I can go very lowbrow. And it's a blast from the past for anyone who collects boutiques, because this is old school Arrow, back when they used to release the white boxes, like Frankenhooker.
Yeah, I've seen that film quite a bit.
I love Frankenhooker. It's so for those who don't know, Frankenhooker, and this is how Arrow films used to come. For anyone who doesn't know, they would all have these window boxes, and they would have 4 covers. The inside would have 2 reversibles as well, and you would decide which one you wanted to face out the window. So that's how all Arrows used to come back in the day, until about 2013, where they just went to the standard boxes. But they all came in these wonderful, and they looked great on the shelf, just all these white spines, just sit and stare at them. But this is the story of our young Jeffrey here, who is essentially your Dr. Frankenstein, who loses his girlfriend in a lawnmower accident and decides that he's going to bring her back, but he's going to bring her back better than ever. So he's going to go around New York City, and he's going to get the most attractive hookers and take body parts from them and assemble the best version of the girlfriend that he's lost. Now, how would you attract hookers? Obviously, it's the 1980s New York, so you would use crack. But James doesn't have money, so he developed something called super crack. Or Jeffrey, I should say. It's James Lawrence that plays him. And there's a scene, which I think I can spoil because it's just one of the joys of this movie. The scene in which he needs the body parts involves the hookers all in a room, so addicted to the super crack that they're all just on the floor, just guzzling it up their noses, and then they all explode.
God,
cut to Jeffrey picking up all the body pieces. And the weird thing is, James Lawrence's performance as Jeffrey in this is one of my favourites in a horror film. And not in a so bad it's good way, best of the worst way. I mean, legitimately, it's offbeat, it's quirky, and it's brilliant.
Okay.
It's directed by Frank Henenlotter, who did the Basket Case movies. He's a frequent commentator on a lot of discs like That's Exploitation, and he's done like Ed Wood's commentaries and things. He's always on these 42nd Street documentaries and things. So
kind of like a Larry Cohen film-ish.
Yes, very much. He's Larry Cohen. If Larry Cohen decided never to leave the gutter, I was proud of, because the stuff has ambitions to kind of,
it's got a message.
Maybe move up the Hollywood ladder a little bit. Yeah. Whereas Frank Henenlotter, his last feature film was Bad Biology, where the man with the world's biggest penis falls in love with a woman with a flesh-eating vagina.
You would, as you would.
But Henenlotter's brilliant. He knows his audience. He knows the cult crowd. He knows horror comedy. He knows 42nd Street. To me, he's a better version of what Trauma have kind of become famous for over the decade. Right. I love Trauma. I love some Trauma. But Henenlotter's just, I think his personal sense of humor is just a bit better than Lloyd Kaufman and the plethora of films that came from Trauma in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
mention, Keach and stuff, and this kind of reminds me of my next question, which I'm sure you've already kind of answered, but do you have certain particular actors or actresses that you like the most?
I've lost them. You shouldn't lose actors. It's a very careless thing.
Where's he at? Where are they at? They're in here. They're in here.
Well, yeah, I have lost them by the looks of it, but it is Jimmy Stewart. He's my all-time favourite, and my favourite film of his is Harvey. I know It's a Wonderful Life is usually the answer for that one, but it's Harvey for me. I think it's just a great meditation on mental health and just letting people be themselves, and kindness being a much more effective tool of communication than overthinking things. It goes back to that Chaplin line from The Great Dictator: we think too much and feel too little. I feel like that's very much the message of Harvey.
Second Criterion I've ever owned was that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's because of that speech.
It's stunning.
Yeah.
And also remarkable that perhaps the most famous silent actor ever had such a great voice and delivered one of the most iconic speeches in cinema.
Yeah.
Which you can't say for Harold Lloyd or Buster Keaton. They never had that moment in the talkie era. Harold Lloyd kind of retired and Buster Keaton became an alcoholic, so they didn't have the opportunities. But Chaplin had that wonderful diction, and Monsieur Verdoux is one of my favourites. I actually prefer his later films.
Yeah,
I kind of prefer his later films, to be honest, to the Little Tramp films, apart from Modern Times, which I think is just breathtaking.
Gold Rush is my favourite, but that's But I everyone has their different favorite ones. I mean, I even love the kid.
Yeah, the kid's fantastic. And how weird that the kid grew up to be Uncle Fester in the Addams Family in the 60s. Strange. Jackie Coogan, how strange. So I'll batter through a couple of these as kind of representative as well. Again, we mentioned horror comedies and things. Reanimator was a big one for me. This is the Arrow edition. And this just jives perfectly with my sense of humour, and that everything in it is taken 100% seriously, and it's only us that are aware that it's a joke. I don't like the people in films knowing it's a comedy. I don't particularly care for that, which is, I was talking about, I can't remember if it was before we were on air or not, but I was talking about the Ghostbusters set that I picked up, the big 4K set. And when people were criticising the 2016 Ghostbusters, I could join in with that criticism, but I'd say, no, it's not because they were female Ghostbusters. It's because they were completely unmannered in their performances. They were all in different movies. And even worse, they all knew that they were in a comedy. Whereas if you watch 1984's Ghostbusters, they don't know it's a comedy. They're all they're taking the threat seriously for what it is. Bill Murray's downplaying it because he's sarcastic hound dog Bill Murray, but it's still treated as a threat. Yeah, that great soundtrack from, was it James Horner that did the actual score for Ghostbusters? That's wonderful. And I think that's the difference, is the characters in the film shouldn't know it's a funny film to make a good horror comedy. Evil Dead 2, another terrific example. Ash is a ridiculous character, but he isn't ridiculous because of his surroundings. He's just ridiculous anyway. Right. So he could be in a sitcom and still be that ridiculous, but he's not. Everything around him isn't playing it for laughs and yucks. It's still deadly serious when people die. It just so happens that it's surrounded by the most ridiculous, the funniest stuff, like the moose laughing and him dancing with the clocks and all that kind of stuff. Another film to batter through with one of my favourite actors of all time, but one that I picked out because it's representative of Scotland and our film industry, is Local Hero. Which
Forsyth, right?
Bill Forsyth, and his first 4 films are untouchable for me. It's That Sinking Feeling, which the BFI have released, which is terrific. This, Gregory's Girl, and Comfort and Joy with Bill Forsyth. Those are all his 4 Scottish set films. And then he moved to do American films and did Housekeeping, which Indicator released.
Yeah.
Which is also a terrific film. That's a fantastic film. Sadly, he's not done anything good since then. He's only done 3 more films. He did one with Robin Williams, which wasn't great. One with Burt Reynolds. It was a kind of crime caper. And it didn't have the Forsyth touch.
You didn't have the Forsyth,
you hear a lot about the Lubitsch touch when it comes to classic cinema and how that, that kind of lightness of comedy. Bill Forsyth very much has that, and it's a magical whimsy that kind of plays on the notion of Scottishness. That Sinking Feeling is ostensibly a story about a bunch of teenagers who rob factories of sinks just to sell for the scrap metal. So teen caper set in Glasgow in the 70s, bunch of deprived teens. But the thing that they use to knock out the guards is, a sleeping potion that they've kind of come up with, one of them read about. But they use the wrong dosage. And then completely randomly, for one scene only, it turns into a futuristic sci-fi film. And we see the guard waking up like 60 years in the future. What the? And then back to the caper film in the 1970s. Now I know Criterion did release this around the same time.
I have mine copy over there. Yeah.
But have you watched Local Hero?
No, that's my area of stuff I still need to see, but I can't watch it. Yeah.
That is and it's very much like we're doing just now. It's very much a hands across the ocean kind of movie, because Peter Reigart, who we see on the cover here, is an American who's sent over to Scotland to buy up this land from this small town so that Burt Lancaster can take over and build an oil rig there and mine the oil.
That sounds like something we would do.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly something the Tories do in England. They steal a lot of it. Well, we won't go down that road. But you think, are they going to go into that kind of political thing? Is it going to be? It's not about that at all. It's about he comes here and he just meets these quirky characters. He's a city boy who's working his way up in yuppie America in the 80s, the Reaganomics era and stuff. So for him to come to Scotland and meet literally a woman who's got webbed feet that everybody thinks is a mermaid, and this little village with a pub, and it's a different lifestyle that he's just never thought of, never been experienced. The soundtrack's by Martin Knopfler from Dire Straits, and that's wonderful too. It's the definition of charm, and it's a terrific movie. Just a fantastic film. Bill Forsyth's masterpiece for me.
Well, yeah, I cannot wait to dive into that. It's gonna be a fun journey. That's for sure. Thinking about this real quick is something that just based on the amount of obviously directors that you've mentioned, would there be a filmmaker or a director that you would like to be in one of their films, even as like an extra or something, if you would be in one filmmaker's movie?
Well, it's a tricky one because a lot of them are such dictators that would you actually really want to be in their films? Because Orson Welles is a great hero of mine, but at the same time he was mercurial and prone to tempers and tantrums and things. So who would I like to? Probably this is a very easy answer, but somebody that you could talk cinema with. So I've literally got his film in my hand here, so I might as well say the next guy up anyway. Martin Scorsese, because he can talk about any film genre. I don't know if you've seen the what's it called, A Journey Through American Cinema with Martin Scorsese.
I haven't seen
The
that. No. Mm-mm.
It's you can get it from the BFI. I'm sure there's an American version, but it's 6 hours across 2 discs, and it's literally just Scorsese showing his favorite movies and clips from them and talking about the director as. So he'll talk about this section's the director as voyeur, and he'll use examples from films that he loves. This section's about the director as iconoclast, or the director as
Okay.
whatever the subject seems to be. And Scorsese, it's literally just him in a darkened room talking to the camera about his favorite films and
I love
why
that.
they are so great. Yeah, I mean, it's a special feature before we really had them, because it came out in 93 or something. So, only laser discs were really coming with special features back then. But I thought that would be a good segue into music as well, because this is, of course, The Last Waltz, which is Scorsese's film documenting the last concert by the band, who are indeed my favourite band. And the guest list for that includes Neil Young, Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton, Muddy Waters, Ringo Starr, Stephen Stills, Emmylou Harris, the Staples Singers. And Scorsese, of course, had been an editor on Woodstock earlier on, and would go on to make films with George Harrison. And he did the Stones concert film, Shine a Light. And obviously his films themselves have iconic sequences that we all think of because of the music. Like when you hear the piano coda from Layla, that's Joe Pesci and the guns in the back of Goodfellas, or Be My Baby is entering the bar in Main Streets, that kind of thing. So I think Scorsese would be the director that I would like to talk about, because we'd have so much to talk about, not just film, but also music.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I love that Eureka edition. I know that Criterion's putting out
4K.
At 4K in the States later on this year, which is amazing. And I still need to see that. And I love the crossover. Well, I mean, it makes me think of, like I mentioned Fantasia, and I've mentioned that a few times with, people who've watched the channel. My appreciation of music is also really, really deep. It's not something I necessarily talk about too much on my channel, but just that combination of the two. And I mean, I heard actually the other day, I with my car, I have a car where I have Bluetooth in there, but it takes about 30 seconds for it to kick in. So I have like a local station here. And I remember, because I actually kind of got enthralled with whatever the conversation was with the DJ or the host or whoever was talking. And they were talking about this concept of classical music. And they were saying like, hey, classical music, where are the fans, right? Well, most of the people who like classical music now are movie fans, and like that's where they've transformed into scores, right? And scores, that's where a lot of people kind of get that classical music sensibilities from. And then I just immediately in my head I'm like, oh yeah, Fantasia, but like obviously that's very on the nose. But you can think of something as recent as like the Batman, right? The Matt Reeves film that just came out, right? Or something like Blade Runner, right? These iconic. Music is so iconic that it's like embedded into the film itself, so it's like it's almost inseparable, which is an amazing trait to have.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I think cinema has lost is themes and motifs when it comes to the actual film. When you think, and the obvious example of this is John Williams, but Superman. Everybody can hum that, Star Wars, obviously, Indiana Jones, or as simple as Jaws, 2 notes. What's the theme for half the Marvel movies or half the DC movies?
I mean, there is like a small one, but it's not as like pronounced, right?
There's the sting they used for the Marvel. It was that shot from the Avengers that kind of wrapped around everyone. They use that now as like the Marvel sting at the start of Marvel productions, don't they? But the scores usually service the movie, you don't come out and hum them, do you? You don't.
No, not at all.
And it seems to be that they've just reverted, especially post Guardians of the Galaxy, to why don't we just use cool songs that we like, and that can substitute. We can sell a character based on the music. So if they're badass, we'll play Bad to the Bone, to be an obvious example from Terminator 2 or something. Yeah.
Well, I mean, even stuff like you could think of like The Big Chill or Dazed and Confused. I mean, we've had that kind of stuff going on for a while, but. Yeah, but like thinking like for at least soundtrack wise, I would say.
Yeah.
But for score, you're right. I think there is something that's very interesting that maybe it's not as it's a lot more subtle, or like you think more about the movie itself and not so much with the score. Obviously, people have different ears for it, and watching is subjective, of course, but there's nothing as like iconic. I know I mentioned the Batman, Matt Reeves. I think that's a good example of something that I will remember. Because
is that Michael Giacchino? I think did that.
I think so. Is that score is like oh, I'm actually paying attention to the score because it actually is really complimentary to what's going on. But I haven't felt that in a while with most of the movies I watch, which is telling. So
see, I think Giacchino is a good one because he created a good theme for the new Star Trek movies in 2009, I guess that would be. And that was a good theme. And, coming up with a theme to be as iconic as the original Star Trek theme ain't easy. And it's not as iconic, but, he gave it a bloody good go. In fact, it was such a good go that he pretty much reused it wholesale when he did the theme for Doctor Strange in the end credits. But if you can't copy yourself, who can you copy? But I think a couple of soundtracks that do stands out for me in the last few years in terms of the score are a few years ago now, but First Man by Justin Hurwitz. There's a terrific scene, and it's all done silent, while Armstrong and Core, literally, it's called The Landing. The track's called The Landing. And it's just kind of the camera straight in his face, and you're seeing the moon reflected on his visor, and the music is so intense and powerful. And that was the first time in a long, long time where I just wanted to stand up and applaud in the cinema just for the score. It just beautiful. Absolutely. And it really sold the majesty of, I'm a space nut and a NASA nut and things, but it really sold the majesty of the whole affair, and just I had a sense of adventure about it, but, also accomplishment, achievement. It was wonderful. And the other one I would say, because it isn't a traditional score, but I still think it's one of the most iconic scores of just about the last decade, because it's just about to be 10 years old this year. Drive.
Oh, yeah.
I think Clint Mansell's score for Drive, which obviously was a much more electronic score.
Right, with a mix of soundtrack too.
And some soundtrack stuff as well, yeah. But the score part was very much integrated into parts of that. Funnily enough, both Ryan Gosling movies, now I think about it. I must go back to The Nice Guys, see if that has a good score. But
fun movie though.
But yeah, so scores, I think they can still enhance the movie when you hear them, but too often they're kind of afterthoughts these days.
Sure, and I do want to talk to the audience at least a little bit. Obviously there are examples of things, and I actually, well, as we were talking, thought of like two examples, maybe one a little bit more towards our taste, and another one that's a little bit more general. But this talking about, like, for instance, Annihilation. Alex Garland is a really great example of, like, he knows how to utilize his score in a sense where it's like it's very enveloping into what's going on in the film itself, and very memorable. And then another one is like Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Like,
yeah,
that's another great score that, like, I have embedded into my mind, right? So there obviously are examples of modern films that are like very, like, it is in tune with the film itself, and the score is like, they're kind of coming together as complementary forces. So
yeah,
but As we kind of wrap this up a little bit, my last question for you, obviously, is outside of watching film and listening to music, of course. How has your passion for this medium kind of impacted your worldview and your interactions with other people?
I mean, obviously, in tandem with social media, you get to meet people from all over the world. So for all the ills of social media and, trolling and falsehoods and disinformation and things, it builds bridges. So it's up to us as individuals whether we want to blow the bridges up or cross them and be friends. And certainly for me, it's very much the former. I've got some wonderful friends that I've never met, and I've made them online through being fans of various things and music. Friends through being a big fan of the Kinks and being a fan of Doctor Who is one of my real favourites. Posted about that a lot to some people's annoyance. Movies, obviously, but it makes the world a more open place. So yeah, I think it's made me more empathetic to people's worldviews, and at the same time, you have to be able to put things in a box when because social media can be a bit of a
Overwhelming.
minefield, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I think it is healthy to take a break from it. But at the same time, I think at no time in human history has it been easier to meet like-minded people, which I think is a wonderful thing. And at no time has it been more possible than people like us to just put our thoughts out there and see if anyone wants to listen. And people do. It's people, like-minded people, and then they start engaging just like I did, just not that long ago, saying, "You know what? I think I could give that a go and see if if the world says hello, then say hello back. I mean, what's the worst that can happen?" So yeah, that's kind of how it's kind of impacted my worldview, really. But yeah.
I couldn't put it in any better sense myself. I mean, I think the thing about this entire, type of film or film journey, the entire type of video series that I just enjoy so much about this, and I know I've reiterated this a lot of the times in the past, but it's worth mentioning. But I just love hearing the variety of different people's interests, opinions, perspectives, where they've come from, what they can share. At the end of the day, it's great that we can actually, feel open enough to talk about stuff, and it's taking that step. I think that really does showcase it. Like, hey, if, like you were saying, if the world says hello and you want to say hi back, it takes effort, obviously, to do that, because things are a little overwhelming. But at the same time, you need at least in some point in your life to say hi back, right? And engage. And I like that, our medium disengages us and engages us in so many different ways, right? We can escape with certain things like, Lord of the Rings, or we can, engage with something like Come and See. Right. We can do these things with these films. And I think it's a blessing. And, so I'm very appreciative that we, had the time today to talk. So now, I guess, do you want to kind of plug away where people can find you?
Yeah. So whatever the name of my channel is, it's Davy's Cinema Flicks and Music Picks. Link in the description, people. It's easier that way.
Here, there.
And again, because it's a multifaceted channel and I do talk about niche things, I don't expect people to watch every video. So by all means, if you want to subscribe, then great. But I'm never going to beg people to, oh, please watch this one, or unless it's an important thing and I really have something to say that I'd like people to. And even then, it would be Facebook rather than, a video about it. So yeah, and I don't have any real inclination for closing off potential ideas for videos. So if anyone has suggestions, then I'm always open to that and reviewing something in the next couple of weeks that someone asked me to do. So, I'm always open to that kind of thing. But yeah, just music or movies, I'm happy to talk about it. And if it's not on my street, then I'll just tell you, I'm sorry, it's not, if you want me to review, I don't know, King Crimson, I'm all for it. But
you just got to do this a lot.
Yeah, but at the same time, some of it, again, like I think we said before the recording, I'm not particularly bothered about doing reaction videos every week to Doctor Who or Marvel or things like that, because I don't want to be too conscious about taking things in as
not
a reviewer or
not coming across like as yourself. Right.
Yeah. I think I could for something like Doctor Who, because I really do love that, and something like Star Trek or something. I could talk about that and kind of deconstruct. But at the same time, there are certain things that I just like to experience as a fan, and that's it. Scorsese took all that flack for saying that Marvel movies and comic book movies were like theme parks. He said that last year, and people jumped down his throat. He's passed it. What does he know? I think he's right. I'm on Team Marty with that one, and I don't think he means it in a bad way. When you watch it, because theme parks, you go on a ride, you experience the ride, it's a thrill, and then when you get off, you go, "Wow, that was great.
Do that again.
What next? What next?"
Yeah.
What did Marvel do? Wow, that was great. That was fun. And then they put a little teaser at the end. Wow, that's coming next. So it literally is the same experience. The same parts of your brain are stimulated. By the post-credit sequence or the teaser trailer and things. There wasn't a bit at the end of Taxi Driver where Travis Bickle meets I don't know. I was going to say Tony Montana, but
he meets the astronaut from all the.
Yeah, Nick Fury didn't come in and go, "I'm very impressed by your shooting skills, Mr. Bickle. We're putting together a team," But so I think there's a place for all kinds of cinema. It's not all going to be my cup of tea. There is something for everyone now. Especially in the age of streaming, and the lines have become so blurred, which is again a completely separate discussion. The idea 5 years ago that an Obi-Wan Kenobi show would get Ewan McGregor, would have just went, "No, that's a movie. What are you talking about? There's a TV show with Ewan McGregor coming back as Obi-Wan." No, that's not going to happen. Colin Farrell is the Penguin in a TV show. I don't think so.
Don't talk about don't talk about Colin. I'm gonna go off.
Well, one of my favorites is
there he is
in Brute. I saw that in the cinema, and that was
All right. Well, thank you so much, Davy, for popping on the channel. And I just wanted to say, everyone who's watching this right now, go check out Davy's cinema flicks and music picks, and
pick like a guitar pick, it was that. It flew over my head for a while too. So
I don't know what it means, but I'm promoting it. I hope everyone enjoys this video. I know it's a little long, and so I hope you stayed till the end. And let us know what your thoughts on some of these questions that we brought up, or some of the conversations we've had. We'd love to see your thoughts down in the comment section down below. So thank you so much for coming by. I hope you enjoyed it. Like, share, hit the notification bell, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.
No Jones.